Hello, and welcome back to Ukraine again. I'm Kimberly Roback. Thank you for rejoining me. Apologies for this, the break that I've taken. I was a little under the weather, which is nothing compared to what anyone in Ukraine is dealing with, but I lost my voice for a little bit. So, okay, now we're back, and over the past few days, over the past week actually, I've come to just question what we as a planet deem acceptable behavior in a war, even outside of a war, and I am ashamed to admit that I but used to be quite proud of my involvement with Amnesty International. I now completely I disavow any connection to Amnesty International whatsoever. I regret having participated in any of their campaigns, which I will tell you about in a moment. I'm sure many of you are aware that on August 4th, Amnesty International decided to issue its report that says that Ukraine is its fighting tactics are endangering its own citizens, and they make a lot of claims here. So I've spent the past couple of days kind of digging through what this report says, what they're reporting on various other atrocities that have occurred since the Russian Federation's unlawful invasion and occupation of Ukraine. And I can say unequivocally I'm disgusted with Amnesty International. I am going to have to start a letter writing campaign apparently to the Taliban or Al-Qaeda, someone who values life more than they do, to complain about their integrity and the positions that they've now placed Ukrainian forces, Ukrainian civilians. Okay, backing up to August 4th. Amnesty issued this report that says Ukrainian fighting tactics endanger civilians. They go on to say that military bases have been set up in residential areas, including schools and hospitals, and that the Ukrainian forces have launched attacks from these populated civilian areas. And then they backpedal and say that this in no way justifies Russia's indiscriminate attacks, which have killed and injured countless civilians. I'd like to point out that the Russians, who call Amnesty International a bunch of crooks, have finally said, well, at least the crooks got something right here. They love this article. They love it. Mainly because it now is carte blanche for them to attack basically any school, hospital, maternity hospital, theaters with the words children painted in huge Russian letters that can be viewed from satellite imagery on them with impunity. They can bomb whatever they feel like it now, because they have, based on Amnesty International, they have some credible evidence that there are Ukrainian forces conducting military operations in those kinds of civilian locations. Thanks, Amnesty. So I will rewind my life back to college, when I thought I knew something and I thought college was a valuable exercise. Wrong on both cases. I had a classmate who was Vietnamese, and his father was a dissident who had been in prison, and I'm not going to get into the details of when or where. But as a college student, I thought, wouldn't it be great to do a letter writing campaign to get my friend's dad out of jail, right? So, like most white Americans who are overprivileged and have never had to actually experience any real tragedies at the hands of their own government, we picked up our pens and wrote letters, and in timing that was most definitely had nothing to do with our letter writing campaign. Fortunately for my friend, his father was subsequently released from prison, and it was a happy occasion. At the time, you would have thought I was John McCain behind enemy lines, fighting to free my friend's dad. No, we found stamps and we used a template form letter. I bet it didn't do anything. I don't think anything that Amnesty International usually does anything. I will point to this August 4th report as something that has done something. It's basically like it's Me Too. It's attacking it's blaming the victim here. Your country's been invaded. You have nowhere to hide. You have nowhere to plan things. School's out for the summer. You use those buildings, and now we're gonna tell on you. I went through their, let's see how many pages. This report that they issued on the Russian missile assault on the theater in Mariupol. It's 67 pages long, and it took them how many months to take them to put together? I think after several months they were prepared to say that dozens of people, dozens of civilians died in the deadly Mariupol theater strike, and they declared that the dozens of deaths to be a war crime. The Associated Press, funnily enough, didn't take months. It took them only a few weeks, and they were able to account for the deaths of over 600 civilians in that structure. Interestingly, Amnesty International used almost all of the same photos that the Associated Press had taken right after the event occurred. They used interviews with the same people the Associated Press had spoken to. And let's see here. The Associated Press had reported right after the event that 100 people who were operating a field kitchen were all also immediately they were murdered. Again, this was so if the assault occurred on, let's see, the end of March. As of May 4th, the Associated Press had numbers, they had photo images, they had interviews, and they had denounced this as an outright war crime. Here comes good old Amnesty International. Let's see how many months later they issue their billion-page report that concludes dozens of people died. Let's see. Yeah, it took them until the end of June to come up with this hot piece of shit right here. Pages and pages of crap that they actually took mainly from other sources. Well done, Amnesty International. Here is their report from July 29th of this year. You'll notice that they spend very little time on this one. This is the one that actually made me so sick to my stomach. I couldn't, I didn't want to keep talking about this, and now I realize that's the stupidest thing you could possibly do. But this was about the castration of the Ukrainian POW by the Russian soldiers who filmed that and put that on it. Amnesty International's coverage of that event, less than 2 pages. The war crimes of the let's see, they've dedicated how many pages here? 1 out of 9 to condemning Ukrainian fighting tactics, which they then again today on August 7th came back and said that they apologize for the backlash, but they stand by their reporting. And again, I don't think it's so much the reporting. I think it's the fact is that the Ukrainians have been very, very careful to not allow press to describe the locations where they do conduct military operations, where they do try to have military bases, where they conduct military meetings, and for good reason. It's their sovereign land that's been invaded, and any advantage that they provide to the Russians is simply one they're not willing to give through the press. These assholes with their stupid candle and barbed wire show up, and they not only say, here are a few instances where we've found that the Ukrainian armed forces have set up camp in schools that are out for the session, abandoned hospitals, bombed out buildings already. But now we're going to provide you the Warsaw mercenaries and any of the poor young Russian men who have not yet been fed into this meat grinder. We're going to provide you with a perfect excuse to bomb those kinds of civilian institutions. Amnesty International said that's where the military targets are, right? So I'd like to give a shout out to the Taliban, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and all these other organizations who don't claim to be something other than what they are. And maybe you guys would like to get some letters about the war crimes being committed by Amnesty International and kind of the positions they're taking that are contrary to the best interests of the civilians in areas where they operate. I know that the woman who was the Ukrainian editor for Amnesty International, she's resigned. Hopefully this will lead to many other resignations and hopefully a lack of access, because quite frankly, if this is what you do with it, I saw almost no condemning. I saw no condemning of the irrefutable proof that the Russians had prisoners of war from Mariupol, from the steel plant, that they moved them into a bunker and then blew them up and then accused Ukraine of doing it. There was zero coverage of that from Amnesty International. So I honestly don't know what it is they're doing with their time and money. I know that I will be giving them neither, and I would encourage anyone else who cares about human rights to stop supporting this organization. So with that, I want to end this Ukrainican just again to reiterate that I think it's been a rough couple of days having these reports come out, and it feels like victim blaming, and it also feels like a betrayal of trust. And it certainly doesn't seem to be saving any civilian lives. I know a great way to get Ukrainian civilians to stop being slaughtered senselessly would not actually involve moving where the Ukrainian military is, but rather the Russian and the Wagner mercenaries, to get them the fuck out of the country and stop blowing them up. That would be a great step in that direction. So on that note, I look forward to posting the next Ukrainican, which is on a slightly happier topic, and I'm gonna do this one for my aunt, whom I adore, who is one of the greatest equestrians I've ever known, lover of animals, tamer of horses. It's finally something uplifting about saving, and again, in the midst of a humanitarian crisis, the likes of which we haven't seen since World War II. Maybe this doesn't seem important to some people, but it is important, and the work that these people are doing is very important. But it's about the horses that are refugees that are being saved from excuse me, from eastern Ukraine, and getting them to where they're safer. So with that, I will say Slava Ukraini. Thank you for joining, and I will see you during the next Ukrainican, where we can talk about hopefully something better like horse therapy and saving some horses. All right, good night.